Last evening on board Britannia, the Prince and Princess were keen to talk about their impressions of this tour, of Italy and the Italians. The Princess, for the first time in public, spoke Italian.
It occurred behind closed doors, where all royal earthquakes start. Queen Camilla sat in a private drawing room at Clarence House, surrounded by a small group of senior staff and legal advisors. There was a manila folder in front of her, unmarked, discreet, the type of envelope that always contains the kind of truth no one wants written down. Inside is a DNA report, verified, stamped, irrefutable. What about the name at the center? Diana, the Princess of Wales. Camilla had hardly finished reading the first page. Her fingertips trembled. Her face had lost its color. And then, without warning, she collapsed on the floor. Royal aides raced to catch her. Security had cleared the wing. A palace doctor was rushed in. The moment was quickly labeled as the type of internal disorder that the crown was designed to suppress. But the harm was already done, because what Camilla read that morning was more than simply a scandal. It represented a major shift in the royal bloodline. According to the article, a 38-year-old man, previously unknown to the public and living a tranquil life under a different name, provided a DNA sample as part of a private legal investigation. The lab, contracted secretly through royal middlemen, assumed it was a formality, just another paternity challenge in a closed case, another whisper drowned out by the firm's never-ending damage control machine. However, the outcomes were undeniable. Diana, Princess of Wales, has a 99.9% match, a match that should not exist, a match that rewrites everything. Camilla had feared many things during her reign, including public hate, tabloid scrutiny, and her precarious position beside King Charles. But she never dreaded this. She never dreamed Diana could find a way to reclaim the throne 28 years after her death. Not through revenge, not through legacy, but only through blood. And now, as the palace braces for the fallout, the crown is rushing to stop a story that may already be too big to ignore. Because if Diana had a secret child, one raised away from the Windsors, what does that entail for the line of succession? What does this signify for Charles? What does this mean for the Queen, who is now lying breathless in her drawing room, clutching a truth she never expected? This is not simply a scandal. This is a reckoning. The monarchy may never be the same. Before the gowns, the global renown, and the tragedy that froze her name in time, Princess Diana was a girl hiding in plain sight. Her life was never completely private, even before she became the most photographed woman on the planet. Despite the scrutiny of royal biographers, tabloid journalists, and palace watchers, there are still parts missing, fragments of time she never explained, moments that faded into history without a trace. Now, in the aftermath of that shocking DNA discovery, those forgotten months are being re-examined with forensic zeal. It turns out Diana did, in fact, disappear from the public spotlight for an unusual period in the early 1980s, specifically, between her engagement to Charles in February 1981 and the birth of Prince William in June 1982. There were the usual explanations: a desire for relaxation, a dislike of media pressure, and sensitive royal etiquette. However, the timelines don't quite add up. Appearances were cancelled. Foreign travels were postponed. Diana's retreat from public visibility was particularly noteworthy, given that she was supposed to openly represent her new royal role. The palace said she was exhausted. Friends said she was distressed. However, some insiders suspected something far more sophisticated. Rumors began to circulate, quiet ones, nothing that would ever make it into print. Diana had built a profound emotional bond with someone during her pre-royal years. A man near to the palace, possibly part of the royal staff or a medical professional, she had trusted him at her most vulnerable moments. More ominously, this connection may have lasted longer than anyone realized, even into her early months of marriage. At the time, no one was willing to tackle it. Not with a wedding around the corner, not with all eyes on the young bride-to-be. The image of Diana, sweet, innocent, and virginal, was critical to the crown's survival. Is it possible she had a lover? Or worse, a child? Unthinkable. Unacceptable. Above everything, unpublishable. So, the questions were hidden. The palace continued to operate as usual, with silence, distraction, and carefully selected photo opportunities. Diana, whether out of obligation or sadness, never spoke about that time period. She moved forward, married Charles, produced an heir. She played the act, even as it ate away at her. But the missing months, the holes in the royal timeline, never went away. And now, decades later, they're being reassessed from a whole other perspective. What appeared to be seclusion is now perceived as a cover-up. What appeared to be royal discretion now feels like purposeful deletion. Could Diana have been pregnant before William and had a child in secret? One idea that has persisted in recent years, quietly, among only the most daring investigators, is that Diana may have had a secret pregnancy during her early years in the royal family. Whether from a previous relationship or one repressed by the firm, the child may have been abducted at birth, adopted under a false identity, or even hidden abroad. What's the motivation? Preserve the crown, protect the image, prevent pandemonium. And now, with DNA proof emerging from a man claiming to be her biological son, those previously hidden fragments are beginning to unravel. Disregarded rumors now seem disturbingly possible. A man of the approximate age, who grew up with loose ties to wealthy British circles but no known parentage, recently sent a DNA sample to a private testing laboratory for personal reasons, sparking a royal outcry when the results revealed a direct maternal link to Diana Spencer. It is no longer simply speculation, it is science. The lost months in Diana's story are no longer a mystery. They could be the key to a royal secret that Buckingham Palace believed would die with her. For decades, Princess Diana's tale has been told in full: her marriage, motherhood, heartache, and legacy. The world has followed her every move, memorized her words, and lamented her death. But behind the images and fairy tale plot, one chapter is notably absent: a child who has never been introduced, never seen, and nothing was ever spoken about it, until now. The thought that Diana had a third child, born in secret and raised away from the public in the palace, sounded like pure conspiracy tabloid fodder, a delusion created by those who refused to let her go. However, as whispers turn into patterns and documents emerge, that dream begins to resemble a dangerously buried truth. Royal insiders now point to a few critical moments in which Diana appeared troubled by something left unsaid. In private letters to friends, she hinted at a loss she never named. In therapy sessions, eventually leaked to the press, she spoke of betrayal, being forced to forget, and fearing what would happen if the truth was out. At the time, it was supposed she was referring to her treatment by the monarchy or her failed marriage to Charles. But in retrospect, those cryptic sentences take on a deeper, more intimate tone. There were stories, never confirmed, of a young woman being sent away for several months on the palace's orders. Some claimed she was a body double, others alleged she had artificial insemination for fertility testing in a research trial with loose ties to the royals. Stranger still were rumors that Diana's eggs were used, whether with or without her knowledge, in a controlled experiment to assess her ability to create royal successors. Far-fetched, perhaps, but then came DNA, and all of the notions that had previously been easily discarded became less so. The man at the center of it all, now in his late 30s, claims he had no idea who his biological parents were. He was raised abroad and had always been told he was adopted. However, as he grew older, he began to suspect more. His features, habits, and even a remote link to aristocratic circles all led to the same place, Britain, and one woman, Diana Spencer. When he submitted his DNA for a normal genealogy test, the findings revealed more than just a basic British pedigree. They pointed directly to Diana's genetic line, a match so precise, so apparent, that the lab reported the findings as a possible international abnormality. Further testing, which was surreptitiously commissioned by third parties, revealed only the maternal match. However, there was no record of the man's birth in any royal archives, no announcement, no hospital logs, and no official documentation tying him to Diana at all. This is the child who has never appeared, no christening, no titles, no public role. The thought of Diana having a secret child is unsettling. The palace was aware of this truth and actively worked to conceal it, because this was more than simply a personal secret. This was a mystery that could unravel the royal bloodline. The report was supposed to remain confidential, a calm formality. Every year, private investigators, aristocratic solicitors, and royal fixers do countless covert background checks, but this one was different because this time, the DNA sample not only hinted at a scandal but confirmed it. In early 2025, a well-dressed man in his late 30s, known only to the testing facility as Subject 07A, sent his DNA to a prestigious private ancestry and kinship firm in Geneva. He claimed no pressing issue, only curiosity. Adopted at birth, he had no clue of his biological parents. He was looking for medical history that could provide clues to his identity. He wasn't expecting fireworks, but the fireworks arrived when the results came in. They were not ambiguous. They indicated a 99.9% maternal match to Diana Frances Spencer, the late Princess of Wales. Initially, the lab personnel assumed there had been an error, a fraud. However, subsequent study, retesting, and cross-referencing with Diana's retained public genomic information used for forensic purposes following her terrible 1997 accident all yielded the same result: this man shared her DNA. Fully. Irrefutably. The news was so stunning that the laboratory's director surreptitiously notified a contact with MI5 ties, a back channel commonly employed in cases involving sensitive national identities. That's when the royal household became involved. Within days, representatives from the royal legal team had obtained the report. Confidentiality agreements were struck. Staff were subjected to rigorous non-disclosure clauses. Subject 07A was covertly monitored. But somebody slipped, and that is how the file came into the hands of Queen Camilla. She received it early in the morning, expecting another round of usual briefings. Instead, she opened a plain envelope containing only 3 pages, clean, clinical, and terrible. There was the subject's name, his age, his general upbringing, and at the center of it all, Diana Frances Spencer, who had a 99.9% maternal DNA match. Camilla's aides claimed her hands shook. Her voice became a whisper, and she muttered, "No, this is not possible." Then, as the room became blurry around her, she slumped. She regained consciousness a few minutes later, but everything had changed. This was not a rumor. This was neither idle chatter nor a supermarket tabloid headline. This was proof, evidence that Diana may have had a secret child. Proof that the monarchs may have conspired, knowingly or unknowingly, to conceal it. Proof that a quiet individual, unknown to the world, could be Prince William and Harry's unrecognized sibling. For Camilla, the consequences were disastrous. If the world found out, all she'd worked for, her precarious standing, her decades-long search for legitimacy, and her strained acceptance by the British public, could evaporate quickly. Because Diana had returned, not as a ghost, but as blood. And Buckingham Palace was about to confront an unprecedented reckoning. For years, Queen Camilla believed the spirits had been buried. She had endured the jeers, the side eyes, decades of being labeled as the other woman in a love triangle that spanned the front pages of every newspaper on Earth. She had patiently waited as Diana enthralled the globe, even after her death. She had smiled through public silence, survived cold welcomes, and, after all the suffering and public scorn, she had been anointed queen consort alongside Charles. However, one document, one DNA result, threatened to take it all away. "She broke," said one royal aide, requesting anonymity. It wasn't all tears. Panic ensued. It was rage. It was fear. Camilla passed out in Clarence House after reading the DNA findings. When she awoke, she allegedly asked the room, "Does anyone else know?" Her voice was soft, strained, and afraid. She was not concerned about science, the science was undeniable. She was concerned about the world's reaction. Camilla understood better than anyone that Diana was more than just a former princess or a tragic character. Diana was mythical, eternal, a symbol of innocence, suffering, and grace. And if it was discovered that Diana had a secret child, an actual breathing manifestation of her legacy, the public sympathy would flood back to her like a tsunami. It didn't matter that Camilla was suddenly queen. It wouldn't matter if she'd waited decades for the crown. Diana's child, Diana's blood, would destroy her. Camilla was concerned about far more than just negative headlines. She dreaded the complete breakdown of royal stability, public outrage, and demands that this son be recognized as the real heir. Pressure on King Charles to meet with the individual. There had been whispered questions about the monarch's legitimacy, particularly in light of recent controversies and familial splits. She understood the people would not simply embrace this man, they'd anoint him. Already, analogies were being made behind palace walls. "He looks like her," one employee commented. "It's unnerving. The same cheekbones, the same smile, even the way he tilted his head while speaking." It was as if Diana had been resurrected as a man wandering freely in the world. Camilla was reportedly furious at Charles. He had not orchestrated anything, he simply said nothing. According to insiders, Charles became frigid after hearing the news. He withdrew, taking lengthy walks through Windsor Gardens and declining meetings. When Camilla asked what they were going to do, he allegedly said, "We'll do what we always do, nothing." Camilla considered that a betrayal. In this circumstance, silence would not save them. Silence would only allow the ghost to speak louder. Camilla felt the floor beneath her feet shift for the first time since she had worn the crown. All of her attempts to reinvent herself, all of her hard-won acceptance from a skeptical public, all of her years spent restoring trust, were jeopardized under the shadow of a lady who had died nearly 3 decades previously. Except now, Diana wasn't a shadow. She was a sun. For Queen Camilla, that was more horrifying than any headline could ever be.